Hey, audit friends and family. Listen, I've got a question for you. Better yet, let me ask you something. Ever get excited about a new tool or an idea or a tech upgrade only to watch your audit team shoot it down faster than you can say workflow disruption? You're probably not alone. In fact, in the world of internal auditing, innovation often dies before it even gets a chance to breathe. But why does this happen? Is it really just the systems and templates that are holding us back? Or is it something much deeper and much sinister? Well, today we're going to peel back the psychological layers, 13 of them. Well, actually, 7. This is part 1. So we're going to uncover why auditors are consistently the last to innovate. And here's a spoiler. It is not because we are lazy. It is not because we are lazy. So let me ask you, are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to Audit Bites, the podcast that helps auditors become awesome. Join us for bite-sized info and education to excel in your auditing career.
Whew. All right, my friends, let me check on something really quick because my audio is terrible. So let's do a little switcheroo right here and tell me, does this sound better? Because I'm hoping it does. Let me just give a little check myself because that audio is not what Audit Bites is used to, right? Let's see. All right, my friends. Ooh, see, that's that horrible sounding audio. I need to innovate and increase my audio game, right? Anyway, hopefully it's sounding better now. Sound better. Because I'm hoping it does. Let me just give a little check myself because that audio is not what Audit Bites is used to. All right. I think this is our better audio. So now, let's get to the subject at hand. Let's get to the subject at hand. Whew. Auditors are the last to innovate. Why is that? We're going to talk about 13 reasons. So welcome back to the show. Listen, I've been gone for about 6 months and I've been getting emails from people. When is Audit Bites coming back? Well, we left strategically. You see, I built, meaning I coded, the first AI platform built specifically for internal auditors, Audit Leverage, and that took a little bit of time to put together. We're not here to talk about that today, but what we are here to talk about is what's holding us back as auditors, really? And how do we move forward smarter? I know that today's topic hits a little close to home for many of us. You've probably heard all the jokes, right? If auditors really wanted to change, they wouldn't have become auditors. But this episode, it isn't about jokes. Well, maybe one or two. It's about understanding why we hold back, what it costs us, and what we can do better. And to get there, we're not just going to list complaints. We're bringing in psychological research, cognitive psychology, organizational behavior, and emotional responses, all the stuff that shapes how we think. And we might have a few laughs along the way, maybe, possibly. My man Clarence is here. Clarence, what are you doing here, man? You're retired now, right? You should be off enjoying yourself. No, I'm just kidding. I love it when you're here, man. But wait, you are retired though, right? You did retire. You didn't change your mind about that? If you did, can I take your place and retire in place of you? Is that possible? All right, look, guys, story time. What is an Audit Bites episode without a story time? Well, it's not an Audit Bites episode. Several years ago, I was a part of an audit team that was trying to do something a little different. I was a contractor in the early stages of the pandemic. And they wanted to operate better, faster, smoother. And they had me doing some walkthroughs for them. And I said, you know what? We're going to be innovative with these walkthroughs. We're going to record them in Zoom. Now, everybody's doing that now, right? But not the way that I ended up doing them a little bit later, a few years later. So I started recording them in Zoom. And then I started using AI once ChatGPT came out, started using AI to actually break them down and figure out what was going well, what was going wrong, until I finally developed a process that was repeatable. So I took it to them, and they were just my clients, right? I didn't work for them. I was a contractor. Took it to them and I said, hey, take a look at this. This is pretty cool. I was able to shave about 20 hours off of a walkthrough. Okay. They looked at it, somewhat impressed, ran it up the chain in the audit department. And then somehow it was quietly buried. No formal rejection, no budget issues, just ghosted. Nobody even followed up, and nobody ever talked about it again. Poof, it disappeared like it never, ever happened. And so when I asked them, as I was rolling off the assignment, I kind of asked them, hey, whatever happened to this thing that we did at this point in time? They looked at me and they said, it's too much change. We don't need something fancy. We've always done it this way. And I'm thinking to myself, you mean the way that cost you 20 more hours that I was able to? Okay, that just sounds all really wrong. Like just really wrong in so many different ways, just wrong. But okay, that's what the client wanted to do. And again, I was rolling off, so I really had no dog in the fight. Anybody ever been through a situation like that before? Clarence, I know you have, man. Clarence says, yes, sir, you are retired. Congratulations, man. Formally, congratulations. Seriously. But look, this decision was made not based on logic, not even based on value. It was based on fear, discomfort, and habit. And that moment, it really stuck with me because here's the truth. We are often the last to innovate. And it's not because we can't, it is because we won't. It is because we literally won't. We're smart people. So obviously it's not because we can't. It is literally because we won't innovate. I don't get it. Does anybody else get it? You have any suggestions as to why auditors are always the last to innovate? You see, that story I just told, some of you might recognize some of these in your team, maybe even in yourself, and that's okay. The goal here is not to point fingers, it's to build awareness, to build empathy, and to build a path forward. Have you ever watched an auditor nowadays review a new AI tool? They kind of lean back in their chair. They look at it like it's a suspicious lasagna someone left in the break room. And they say, this looks promising. And then they squint a little bit. Then they ask, has anyone used this yet? And then they ask, what are the downsides? And then they ask, what if it messes something up and it's my name attached to this? That's not really resistance. That's just a survival instinct. And it's deeply wired within us. And so that brings us to the first reason that auditors are the last to innovate. And it's because risk aversion is built into what we do. Risk aversion is strongly built in to what we do. We're just afraid of everything, including our own shadows sometimes. We don't even understand that risk is not just a nasty four-letter word. Risk can also be good. There's a good side to risk. There's a bad side to risk. But risk aversion is built into what we do, unfortunately. Now, there are some psychological reasons behind that because it's not just auditors, it's kind of human nature. Let's talk about prospect theory for just 1 minute. That was developed by psychologist Daniel Kahneman. as far back as 1979, they've been doing research on this. And what prospect theory essentially says is that people feel the pain of losses about twice as strongly as they feel the joy of gains. So imagine that. Whenever you're hurt, that hurt is magnified more than the joy or the victory that you have. In some of their initial experiments, they were quite simple. And I'm going to oversimplify it some, right? Let's call this the game frame. Imagine you were given $1,000. And with that $1,000, you must choose between two things. A sure gain of $500, meaning you'd have $1,500 in the end, right? Or B, a 50% chance to gain $1,000, meaning you would have $2,000, or a 50% chance to gain nothing, meaning you'd have your original $1,000. Which one would you choose? I'm asking you as my audit friends. If this were you, which one would you choose? Would you take the $1,000 and then take a chance on doubling that to $2,000, or would you take the safe bet of $500? Which one would you choose, Clarence? I'm just really curious because I know which one I would choose. I guess it would depend on how broke I was at the time, right? But I know which one I would choose, and I have a reason as to why I would choose that one. But their research showed some very interesting things. Their research showed that people would take the safe risk, the safe bet. They would take the guaranteed $500 versus rolling the dice on a chance to do something different for a bigger return. I think that's interesting. Without risk, there is no reward. And so realistically, people are risk averse when it comes to gains. We prefer sure things. But understand that risk seeking when it comes to losses, we got to be willing to gamble some. We have to be willing to gamble some. Now think about this in the internal audit context. If innovation might save you 20 hours a week, that would be cool, right? But it might lead to a material error or client confusion. And that's where panic sets in, and that panic fuels our desire to not innovate. But again, it's not just us. This is just people in general. So look, if we think that we're not innovating because risk aversion is built in, especially based on prospect theory, what can we do? Okay, got some solutions for us. The first thing that we can do is reframe innovation. You see, in audit, we oftentimes look at innovation like, oh no, don't do it. It's risky. This is very risky. Something bad might happen if we innovate. But again, without innovation, there is no real reward. So you got to reframe innovation from being this bad thing to being risk that might give you a reward, or it might be bad. But if we don't address both the good and the bad side, we'll never move forward. The second thing we have to do is run small, low stakes experiments. It's okay to start small. It's okay to have small failures because those lead to big successes later on. Think about it. SpaceX wasn't built overnight. How many rockets blew up before we saw that video a few months ago where that rocket came back down and landed in the same spot that it took off from? Could you imagine if Elon and crew had just said, nah, we're not doing that because it's too scary? Which brings me to the third point. Create sandbox environments where auditors can play without consequences. You've got to let people play, and stay tuned. I'm going to give you a study from Google that shows just how powerful team dynamics and being playful really is. Okay, so look, I once worked with this senior auditor who kept a 12-tab Excel workbook for every audit that they'd done since 2007. Okay, maybe maybe it wasn't since 2007, right? But it was a long time, and it was color coded, almost like watching Bob Ross do some painting, right? Paint by numbers. So I gently suggested, hey, maybe you should kind of save some of those onto a disk off of your computer because it's using up a lot of, memory, and you're making your computer real slow. This dude looked at me like I had asked him to throw away his wedding photos. He looked at me and said, this has been with me for 15 years and it still works. Now I'm like, what? Okay. All right. Gotcha. So that leads us to the second reason auditors are always the last to innovate, and that is the status quo bias. Now, I didn't make this up. Let's talk about what the status quo bias is. Quentin, good to see you, my man. Good morning. How are you, sir? Let's talk about what the status quo bias is, because I didn't make this up. This theory was coined by two psychologists, Samuelson and Zeckhauser, way back in 1988. It is the psychological tendency to prefer that things stay the same, even if the same is outdated, inefficient, or harder in the long run. Remember the story I told you guys earlier, how I created a process that could save you 20 minutes at minimum doing your walkthroughs, and the company didn't want to implement it? It's the craziest thing to me, all out of fear and status quo bias. So here's what one study that they did said. They took participants and they told them that they'd inherit a lot of money and they had to invest the money that they inherited. They gave them three different options. Option A was to invest in company A, which was a new company. Option B was to invest in another new company. We'll call it company B. And option C was to keep the current investments. They just had to invest the money. Now, despite no advantage to the default company, most chose to leave that money where it was. So there was no advantage in keeping it where it was. Most people chose to keep the money where it was. Now, this experiment has been repeated throughout time, and it yields the same result. But why? Because choosing something new meant that they had to think harder and own the risk of being wrong. So what this translates to in audit is, why try a new risk matrix when this one is fine, even if it isn't? The other thing that it means is it could tell you, don't try audit leverage. Again, the AI platform built for auditors by auditors because I coded it. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm not here to talk about audit leverage a whole bunch, but what I want you to do for those listening live, drop into the chat if you want to see a small demo. And later on, when we run through our points, I'll give you a brief demo of one of the powerful tools within audit leverage that will guarantee to save you time on your audit engagements. And Jennifer is here this morning. Good morning, Jennifer. And Quentin and Clarence. Good to see you guys. There are a few more people here and on the YouTube channel. Don't be shy. Say hi. It's always good to collaborate with other fellow auditors, because what we're talking about today are 13 reasons why auditors are the last to innovate, right? So we're just going to jump right into reason number 2. As I've been saying, it is the status quo bias. But how can you be innovative if you're stuck in the status quo? The first thing that you can do, and this one is for you lower level auditors, not the audit director or not the chief audit executive. If you really want your boss to buy into something, don't just propose changes. Show the side by side to your boss. Here's what we're doing now and the impact. Here's what I propose and the impact. See, a lot of times what we do as auditors, we just complain. Oh, I don't like this process. Okay, well, do something about it. If you don't like something that's happening in your city, county, state, or country, what do? You vote, right? So you mean to tell me you're going to go to work and see things that you don't like and not do something to make a change? just forgive what I'm about to say, 'cause somebody's going to be mad and I'll get a nasty gram. But that's what my grandmother used to call being stuck on stupid. Doesn't make sense. Now, this next one, if you're stuck in status quo mode, is for you audit directors and chief audit executives, because you're a part of the problem too, right? If we're going to tackle this thing, we got to do it holistically. So the next thing that you need to do is give auditors a trial mode to ease into new methods. See, oftentimes what we do is we expect perfection from the start. There's absolutely no such thing as perfection. I realize that when I look in the mirror every morning. Far from perfect, right? But, you know, you got to give auditors a trial mode to ease into new methods. And now, for you chief audit executives and audit directors, here's the last thing you got to do if you're stuck in status quo bias. You got to make change fatigue a part of the conversation. People are going to be tired when things are changing, because now they have to do their job and they got to manage this new process. And then, oops, if something goes wrong, they got to manage that too. You can't be mad when errors pop up. That doesn't make sense. You're setting your people up for failure. Oh boy. So now Jennifer, that's another Jennifer, not the first Jennifer. Jennifer wants to see a demo. All right. And then the other Jennifer wants to see a demo too. You know what? If I get one more person that says that they want to see the demo, then I'll give you a brief demo towards the end, right? Or maybe towards the middle. It just depends on how I feel. You want to see it now? Okay. While I give you guys some time to think that through, let's talk about the next one. Because let's be real, auditors live in a world of documentation. Everything we say, recommend, or write goes into some kind of permanent file that may at some point be reviewed, challenged, or, God forbid, audited. Anybody ever been through a QAR? So it's not surprising that many auditors would rather stick with the known than risk putting their name on an unproven idea. But don't just take my word for it. Again, there is research behind that, but let's talk about reason number 3. That's the fear of being wrong on record. That's the fear of being wrong on record. Think about it. Nobody wants to be wrong on record. You were wrong, is what your audit clients say. And now they say, we can't trust you. And you're like, well, it was just one mistake. I'm not perfect.
How dare you?
Really? Can I just make a mistake? This shouldn't signal the end of my career. But most of us fear being wrong on record. But again, don't just take my word for it. There is research about this. Research, we call it the fear of negative evaluation. The fear of negative evaluation. And let me explain to you what that is, because again, that one was, you know what? Sorry, I can't tell you who discovered this one because it escapes my name right now. That's what happens when you do a podcast live, right? I was talking to Trent the other day. You guys know Trent. And I said, hey, Trent, am I crazy because I do the podcast live? I just like the interaction with people. Clarence says he wants to see the demo too. I guess after this one, I got to show the demo, huh? I got to be a man of my word. That's 3 people. Okay, so let's talk about the fear of negative evaluation. This study goes back all the way to 1969 and has been replicated since then. But that's when we first said, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Here's what that study found, though. It found that some people experience intense anxiety, not from failure itself, but from the possibility that others will judge them negatively. Now, if you've ever felt that way, give me a thumbs up in the chat. I do this for a reason. I do this because I want other people to see that they are not alone in feeling the things that they feel, because I have felt that way. Better yet, let me put a thumbs up in the chat too. I'm asking everybody else to do it. Let me put a thumbs up in the chat. There we go. I've felt this way myself. I have for sure felt this way. The anxiety, not from the failure itself, but from the possibility that others might judge you negatively. Now, let me tell you, in high accountability professions like auditing, this shows up a lot. There's a hesitation to propose new methods a hesitation to recommend new tools, especially if they are not approved yet. Think about this. An auditor may have an innovative idea for visualizing risk using dashboards, but they hesitate to include it in the report or the discussion because of what the client might think or because of what their CAE might think. Because if leadership doesn't love it or worse yet, questions it, it could damage their credibility. And so they continue auditing like it's 1999. Now, let me add on top of this, on top of the fear of negative evaluation, then steps in imposter syndrome. Oh boy, that hits high achievers the hardest. Even the most competent auditors can second guess themselves when trying something new because you have that internal voice that says, if this goes wrong, they'll finally realize that I don't belong here. And then poof, there goes your innovative idea. It's gone. Now, Martin has felt that feeling before. Martin has dropped that thumbs up emoji into the chat. Now, here's what I'm going to do for just one moment because I made a promise. 3 or 4 people said that they wanted to see a very quick demo of Audit Leverage. So what I'm going to do is break away for just one moment and I'm going to show that demo. Now, this wasn't planned, but it's what you guys said you wanted. So give me just 1 second to set it up. Wait a minute. I may have made a mistake here, friends. Okay, hold on. Give me just 1 second. I've got to set it up on my second monitor so that it shows. Okay, here we go. So, my friends, this is Audit Leverage. And as you can see, there's several different modules that help you throughout the audit process. There's something I call plan leverage, process leverage, think leverage, root leverage. We're not going to get into all of those. I'm just going to show you one powerful tool. How long does it take you all to do a risk and control matrix? It probably takes a very long time because you have to think up the risk, think up the controls, put it all together. So let me show you how we do this in Audit Leverage. Let's say you're in the financial services industry. You know what? Let me take a look and see who actually asked for a demo. So, all right. So one of the Jennifers asked for a demo. An accounting and compliance. Okay, what does the other Jennifer do? I'm trying to see what industry you're in. Oh, you're in compliance too. So both Jennifers are in compliance. All right. So let's just say you're in the financial services industry and you're looking at something as simple as mortgage-backed securities, which is not simple at all, right? That's why I picked this one. Well, at the click of a button, you're going to have a risk and control matrix that tells you, here's the process for mortgage-backed securities, here are the risks, and here are the controls. And look at there. Oh boy. Now, how much time would this save you as an auditor? How much time would that actually save you as an auditor? Or as a compliance person too, for my 2 compliance Jennifers that are watching. It's not just for auditors, it's for compliance people too. But as you can see, there are a bunch of modules over here that do a bunch of different things. This one actually helps evaluate your walkthrough. You give it your walkthrough and it tells you what additional questions you need to ask to make it complete. And again, I coded and designed this. I've been an auditor I've been in the profession for almost 30 years. So, I mean, if I can't build something that's useful to us, then what good am I? All right, that's a quick demo. I'm going to get off the high horse here and we're going to go back to our presentation. Here's what I will say. If you have an audit department that is looking for AI, schedule a demo with me. You can go to auditleverage.net. You can find my information here on LinkedIn. You know how to find me. I'm easy to reach. You see me everywhere. So let me know if you want a demo. If you're an individual auditor who wants to level up your game, we do B2C, but we also do B2B. So we can sell business to consumer as well as to entire audit departments. So if you're an individual auditor, it's for you too. So let's go back where we were. Ooh, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong one too. There we go. Hi. So reasons that auditors are last to innovate. Reason number 3, fear of being wrong on record. Now, if you have a fear of being wrong on record, what can you do about it? Let's talk about that. First thing that you can do is build credibility first and then innovate second. So I'll tell you. Okay. So I'll tell you, there have been several periods throughout my career that I've had to innovate. And in innovating, it made it easier if I already had a decent relationship with the audit clients because I didn't keep secrets like we do sometimes as auditors. I went directly to my clients and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking. We're going to pilot it. So I need for you to be patient. I'll give you an example. Everybody's now talking about these one-page audit reports. Shout out to my man David over in the UK. Everybody's talking about being more efficient. I created the first video audit report in something like 2014 or 12. I just recorded myself with the webcam, uploaded it to PowerPoint, and it was like 120 seconds. And it was an audit report. Now, I didn't like it because webcams back then were very crappy and I didn't have on-camera presence. But I tried it and I beta tested it with a couple of clients and they were like, wow, this is good. So you got to be willing to try things. And if you already have some credibility, clients will be willing or more willing to accept the things that you try. I come up with a lot of ideas. I mean, how many other auditors do you see doing a live podcast on LinkedIn and YouTube? I'll tell you, zero, none. There are quite a few with good podcasts, and that requires innovation too. My friend Trent, some of you guys may listen to the Audit Podcast. Trent is great. I'll shout out John Tabor, Audit 15 Fun. You got to listen to that one too. Very innovative in the way that he does it. So, build credibility first, innovate second. Next thing is use pilots and soft rollouts. Tell your clients it's not going to be perfect. Tell your clients we're trying. Tell your clients here's our pilot. One thing that auditors have problems with is trying to do a company-wide risk assessment over everything on their audit universe. I call it the risk universe, though. I did it at a few organizations. We rolled it out as a pilot with a few departments first, and over time, every department was literally participating in the risk assessment process. Now, the third thing you want to do is co-author innovations. Partner with some of your clients. The reason I was able to get that risk assessment rolled out is because the CFO sponsored it for her unit. And then other VPs, EVPs, saw that she had sponsored it and they wanted to participate in something that an auditor was doing. Talk about some FOMO, right? It was fear of missing out. That's all. It wasn't like they really wanted to do it. Just fear of missing out. And Jennifer says she performs audits as well. Cool. That is awesome. Okay, so listen. Third reason that auditors don't innovate is because there's a fear of being wrong on record. If you really want to get over this, the first thing you need to do is build credibility first and then innovate second. Next thing you want to do is use pilots and soft rollouts. And the third thing you want to do is co-author those innovations. Partner with your audit clients. Now, here's a fourth bonus. You want to ask for pre-feedback. You want to float the idea first informally before the big reveal. Hey, I was thinking about doing this, and see what they say. See what they say. In one of my audit jobs, I remember I inherited an audit department where my audit committee package or the previous guy's audit committee package was like 30 pages long. I was like, no, we're not doing that. So went to my audit committee chair and I said, hey, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I can cut this down to 4 pages, dashboards too, very few words. And he said, oh yeah, next time we meet, show me what you're thinking. Now, I already had it with me, so I showed it to him right then. And that's when he looked at me and he said, I thought you said you had an idea. I did. And if you didn't like it, I wouldn't have pushed it further until some other point in time in the future. See, that tip right there, that's cash money. That's cash money tip right there. I want you to remember that. Seriously. Okay. Auditors are often the last to innovate. Sorry about my slide deck here. If innovation is messy, then perfectionism is like the mop that we keep reaching for, whether we need it or not. Because as auditors, we have to clean up the mess. But innovation is messy. You see, auditors are trained to get it right. And I don't mean close to right. And I don't mean creative. We're trained to get it just right, which makes innovation, well, by nature, fuzzy, experimental, unpredictable. And sometimes it actually feels like a threat. Anybody threatened by innovation? Because AI is going to take our jobs. Woo! Okay. But this isn't just a preference for accuracy that we have. It goes much deeper than that. It really is perfectionism. It really is perfectionism. And that is reason number 4 why auditors are always the last to innovate, is because we are stuck in this constant loop of perfectionism. It is real, but let's talk about this. There's some research that backs up what I'm saying here. This is tied into the fixed mindset theory. Look up Carol Dweck in 2006. You see the reference there. If you want to fact check me, go right ahead. Carol's research, it was on mindset, and it showed that people with a fixed mindset believe that their skills and intelligence are set in stone. So if you try something new and it flops, that failure reflects who you are. And we all know that that's crazy, but does that sound familiar to anyone? You see, in a fixed mindset environment, like many audit departments, trying something different isn't framed as learning. It's framed as risking your credibility. Think about the audit manager who refuses to let a junior auditor experiment with a new way to map out controls. Let's not reinvent the wheel, they say. But really, it's the fear that the new method might look sloppy, especially in the beginning. It'll make us look bad. It'll make us look bad. So now when you stack on another psychological pressure to this, and that is the need for cognitive closure, that's when we're really cooking here. Because see, this concept, it explains the craving for quick, clear answers, especially when you're under pressure. And auditors, let's just face it, we want closure. And the problem with that, though, is innovation often starts with ambiguity. There's no guaranteed outcome, no perfect example to copy, no checklist. Innovation starts with ambiguity. This is why some auditors avoid brainstorming sessions. They'll say things like, let me know when it's done. Let me know what they say. But they're missing the point. We're supposed to help shape change, not come in after the fact and always be the ridiculer. Sometimes we're supposed to lead change. You do understand that since I've now built Audit Leverage, the AI platform for auditors, I now understand how to actually audit AI systems within an organization. That's the power of curiosity for an auditor. Now, Dweck's mindset theory is widely cited in education and leadership. There's a lot of research that suggests that fixed mindsets in high-stake professions correlates with lower innovation output and a higher fear of failure, especially when performance evaluations are rigid. And so this reinforces what we see. Auditors who fear appearing imperfect often stall out their own professional growth. Think about it. Think about auditors that you may have met years ago who were hardcore accountants, who refused to learn a little bit about IT, a little bit about data analytics, and who refused to brush up on their soft skills. Where are they now? Where are they now? You know where they are? They're the auditors that you hate to work with because they're a pain in the butt. Okay, so now, if you suffer with reason number 4, perfectionism, what can you do? What are some things that you can do? The first thing, now this one is for you chief audit executives. and you audit directors. Separate innovation from the final output. Not everything has to go in your audit report. Not everything has to be shown or told to your audit client, especially when you're sandboxing, when you're experimenting. You've got to allow your auditors to test ideas without the pressure to publish. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to give you a Google study on this a little bit later. It's coming up just a few minutes. Let me take a look here. So yeah, we've been at this for about 40 minutes. This podcast doesn't go much longer than an hour. Usually it's about 30 to 60 minutes. So we're on reason number 4. And for those of you who didn't hear it, this is part 1. Part 1 stops at reason number 6. So we're almost there. This is part 1. All right. So the next thing you want to do is you want to praise the process, not just the product. What I mean by that is the finished product. You see, managers who reward curiosity and iteration, not just clean results, get more experiments from their people. Ask them, what did you try? Why should this matter? What did you deliver? We've got to praise the process, not just the product. Now, don't get me wrong, the final product is important. But how do you get to the final product without a process? How do you have a process that's not messy? Put down your mops, auditors. Stop trying to clean up every piece of mess. Take a look and evaluate the mess first. Look at the progress that's going towards the cleanup. The other thing that we have to do is adopt beta language. We have to reframe our pilots or our prototypes as beta versions. It gives us permission to be imperfect while still making progress. Now, granted, if you're doing a SOX control test, it's got to be right. But when you want to add that additional value to your client, you say that that process failed. Now, look into why it failed. Why are you going to critique without being constructive? The critique of this failed without, hey, based on our observation, here's why. Do you need any help from us in getting this fixed? Now, I don't mean help by directly going in and doing the work, but suppose you're dealing with someone whose manager is making it difficult for them to actually do the job because of outdated technology. Wouldn't you want to be able to have a word with that manager so the person can get the job done? Just writing this failed testing does no one any good. From our standpoint, when we're innovating in our own departments, we got to adopt beta language. If we're stuck in perfectionism, separate innovation from the final output. Praise the process, not just the product. Adopt beta language. Adopt beta language. Because look, some audit teams don't just follow the rules, they worship them. And while that's great for documenting segregation of duties, it is not so great when the world is shifting around you and your audit methodology hasn't changed since dial-up internet. Anybody remember AOL or AOL as we used to call it back in the day when it got really, really bad? So let's talk about why this happens. This happens when you have a compliance-first culture. Don't get me wrong, compliance is important and compliance is good. But how many rules do you have to comply with today that didn't exist 10 years ago? I'll wait. I only use that as an example to illustrate the fact that compliance changes. Sometimes we add on more layers. Sometimes we find out some of the things that we were doing don't make any sense, so we strip away some layers. So we should never be afraid to question certain things that we're required to comply with, to see if they are still accurate and relevant. And if they are, by all means, comply with them. So don't think that I'm saying don't comply. But when you're in a compliance first culture, sometimes people blindly comply. And what happens when the blind leads the blind? Well, it's typically not good. So reason number 5 is we have a compliance first culture. But let's talk about some theories behind this. There's one theory called the institutional theory, and you see the sources cited there. This theory says that organizations conform to industry norms not because it's the best thing to do, but because it is the safest thing to do. And audit is no different. Think about this. Many teams mirror what the IA has to say, or what the Big Four are doing, or what's written on their 10-year-old audit charter. And when compliance becomes the primary identity of an audit department, creativity gets buried under frameworks, and then you end up doing only Sarbanes-Oxley work, which kind of puts you to sleep, right? That's when you hear people saying things like, let's not test anything unless there's a template for it. Well, no, you got to go out and create your own This is that really? Or they'll say things like, this isn't in our audit universe. Well, add it. Sometimes they'll say, well, this is what the standards say. Is it really? I'll give you a good example. There's been this debate going on for a very long time where auditors have been saying, we can't deliver one-page audit reports, or we can't deliver video audit reports because the standards say we have to write a report. Well, my friends, that's where you're absolutely wrong. The standards don't even say that. They say that we have to communicate the final outcome to audit clients. It doesn't specify a certain communication medium or method. But that's what happens when you live in a compliance-first culture where we don't even think outside the box. What does this thing really say that we have to do? Now, let's move on to the next one, though. Role theory. Role theory says that our behavior is shaped by the roles that we believe we occupy. And so if auditors see themselves as rule enforcers, framework keepers, and compliance watchdogs, then, well, guess what happens? When someone proposes an agile risk sprint or a human-centered audit approach, we say, that's not our job. The role we assume limits the tools we'll use. Let me say that one more time, because the role that we assume limits the tools that we eventually use. Auditors who believe their purpose is to protect the rules often struggle to rethink them, even when rethinking the rules will lead to a better outcome. Again, the IIA standards don't say you have to prepare and distribute a written audit report. It has nothing against a one-page summary. It has nothing against a video report. It actually has nothing against just a quick email. It says that you have to demonstrate that you communicated the results. So, auditors and innovation, compliance-first culture. What do you do if you find yourself stuck in one? So how to innovate inside compliance. First thing you want to do is use the standards as a starting point, not a ceiling. Use the standards as a starting point, not a ceiling. They are your base. They are the standard. Standards are meant to guide, not dictate. Next thing you want to do is create safe zones for experimentation. And I know what you're thinking. You kind of said that before. Yeah, I did. It's repeated about 2 or 3 times throughout this podcast episode for a reason. Did anybody else pick up on that? Anybody else? Anybody? So you want to create safe zones for experimentation. The next thing you want to do is you want to give the public permission to color outside the lines. And by the public, I mean your audit department, not just your close-knit management group in the audit department. Give your auditors room to color outside of the lines. You'll be surprised what people come up with when they are given permission to experiment. Okay, reason number 6 is coming up, because let's be honest. You can be or have the best idea in the world, but if your CAE isn't into it, it just dies in their inbox, or worse, on a whiteboard where you first scribble down the idea when you had post-training enthusiasm. Some of you are going to write some of the stuff down that I've said and be like, oh, this is exciting. We should do this. And then you're going to send an email to your CAE or your audit manager or your director, and they're going to say, we can't do this. And then it's just going to die. Now, here's my caveat. This isn't about bad leaders. It's about missing signals. And auditors, we're always watching for signals. So let's talk about reason number 6 that auditors fail to innovate. And that reason is lack of leadership support. I've got quite a few chief audit executives that listen to this podcast, and this is my message for you. You set the tone. You don't have to know how to do everything. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is setting the direction, hiring the right people to do the right job, giving them the tools to do said job, and then getting the hell out of their way. So let's talk about this. Why is there often a lack of leadership support? I think it's quite simple. I think it all boils down to the concept of social learning theory. This theory says that people learn behaviors by observing others, especially those in power. If the audit director never asks about innovation, if the CAE ignores tech upgrades or says just stick to the plan, then guess what? Nobody in the department innovates. And it's not because your people are lazy. Let me say that again. It is not because your people are lazy. You don't get to do that. You don't get to shovel the blame off on the people that work for you because you chose them. The other thing you chose to do is teach them that creativity isn't rewarded here. If people don't believe that their effort will lead to a reward, they simply won't try. People follow unspoken rules, and oftentimes silence from the top is an unspoken rule. So let's talk about the next one, the expectancy theory. I just gave that one away already, right? If I don't believe my effort will lead to reward, I won't try. You see, auditors are pragmatic. If we sense that there's no real buy-in, no resources, no timeline, no champion for innovation, we'll just keep doing what works until we find another job. Motivation needs fuel. And leaders, you all hold the gas can. Motivation needs fuel. And leaders, you hold the gas can for that fuel. So let me tell you about a study at Google. They wanted to know what made teams more effective, what made some teams more effective than others. So they studied 180 teams. They tested 250 different variables, and they spent over 2 years doing the research. Now, they named it the Aristotle Project. The Aristotle Project. And it was named after one of Aristotle's great quotes, "The whole is greater than the sum of the parts." And so again, they analyzed project data from hundreds of teams across Google. And guess what they found was the number one predictor of team success. What I'm going to do now, there's a small delay between when I say things and when you all get it, but I want to see if anybody can guess. I want to see if anybody can guess. Oh, somebody's going to Google it and cheat. I shouldn't have said that. I want to see if somebody can guess what the number one predictor of team success was. And while I'm waiting on anybody to give an answer to that, here's what I want to tell you. If you like this podcast, send it to all your friends. If you really like this podcast and you are active in an IA chapter, tell them that they need to bring me in either for virtual or in-person training. I have a course catalog of over 50 courses spanning everything from IT for the non-IT auditor to soft skills to better audit planning to, guess what, auditing artificial intelligence. If you really, really like this podcast and you work in an audit department that's, of some size, tell your CAE they need to bring me in for private training because I do that as well. So now, I'm just curious. Anybody have a guess at what the number one predictor of team success was, according to a study done by Google over a 2-year period of time where they studied over 180 teams and tested over 250 different variables? Okay, so no one's going to answer. Oh, I feel bad because I was going to give away a prize to anyone who guessed it right. But having heard none, I'll give you the answer. The answer was psychological safety. It was the number one predictor of team success. Not intelligence, not tenure, not fancy frameworks or standardized processes. Just this one thing. Can I take risk on this team without being punished or humiliated? Now let that sink in for a minute. And now imagine being an audit staffer who wants to use AI for walkthrough planning, or just to build a risk and control matrix like I just showed you using audit leverage a few minutes ago. But the last guy who suggested it, well, they were labeled as being too creative for audit, or they just didn't know how things work around here. You see, without leadership support, innovation isn't just unlikely, it's also unsafe. It could cost you your job and your reputation. So in conclusion for this Aristotle Project Aristotle, it found that how a team works together, the team dynamics, is more important than who's on the team. Now, granted, you can't be trying to launch rockets like Elon and not have rocket scientists on the team, right? But psychological safety in particular is critical for high-performing teams. It's critical for high-performing teams. So, number 6, we said was lack of leadership support. So how do you be innovative if you have a lack of leadership support? This one is for you staff auditors, you senior auditors, and you audit managers. You got to frame innovation as a solution to their pain. Look, if you want support, show leaders how it saves time. Show leaders how it reduces risk. Show leaders how it improves the client's perception of the audit department. Not just something that looks cool or something that's modern. Tie innovation into audit performance goals. Help leaders see how, well, new approaches align with KPIs like efficiency, insight quality, or management satisfaction. Second thing I want you to do is tie innovation to performance goals. I think I just said that. I may have gotten ahead of myself there. So yeah, if you have a lack of leadership support, first frame innovation as a solution to their pain. Next, tie innovation to performance goals. The next thing I want you to do is start small, but start visible. Pilot something low risk. Once you've had some successes low risk, make it loud. Share wins. Include metrics when you share those wins. Leaders support what they can point to in the boardroom. Imagine your CAE telling the audit committee, yeah, because we implemented this new whatever it is, we were able to do whatever you were able to do faster. For example, because we implemented audit leverage, we were able to shave 20 minutes off of our walkthroughs, 2 hours off of our audit planning, 3 hours off of our risk matrix, preparing our risk matrix. Sounds different from, I just want to get this cool new tool because it's AI and everybody's talking about AI. I really do believe we're at a point of AI fatigue. How many of you have sat through AI presentations recently where all they did was give you generic definitions that you've heard over and over again, but no one's actually told you, okay, how do you audit it? Or how do you really use it hands-on, practically? Anybody? I know I'm not the only one. So then the last thing you want to do is ask for permission to experiment, not necessarily for funding. And here's what I mean by this. Years ago, I worked in an audit department, and I do mean years ago, a long time ago. Probably going to age myself now, but worked in an audit department, and we weren't doing anything from a data analytics standpoint, not for real. Part of it was because we were busy doing a lot of other things because we had just built the department. It was fairly brand new. But there were a couple things that happened that changed a few things. First, anybody remember the IDEA data analytics software? So IDEA was pretty cool software, but it was fairly expensive for a small audit department. But one thing they did was you could get an academic version of the software. Now, the academic version limited you to 1,000 rows of data, but it did not limit you to what you could create. You could query any and everything just like the full software. So I ended up getting an academic version and writing a few queries on accounts payable and found a few things. And guess what? Because I experimented, we actually got the funding that we needed to purchase the software. So if you're sitting here with innovative ideas, ask for permission to experiment first, not necessarily funding. If you come asking for money, your manager doesn't see the payoff. Now, granted, sometimes you do have to blindly fund things. But if we're always begging for additional resources without a potential payoff or an idea of what the payoff is, why would anybody buy into that? So what I want to remind you is, well, today's episode is sponsored by Audit Leverage, right over there, the best AI software built by auditors for auditors. If you like this podcast, go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I mean, you can get notifications of when we do it. We do it every other week. And as I said earlier, I took 6 months off so that I could actually build Audit Leverage. And now we're back, and this is episode 74, I believe. So you see how long we've been around. Next thing I want to remind you is this episode is also brought to you by that audit guy. That's me. Go to my website. You can find my course catalog if you like this form of training, where we have practical examples bringing in real world research evidence. This is how a lot of my trainings go. I don't just sit here and tell you things that are fluff. A lot of times, though, if we're in person, of course, there's a lot of interaction back and forth. If you're in an IA chapter, bring me in. We have a lot of fun. Talk to some of the previous chapters that I've done work for, and they will give you glowing reviews. That I promise. I see some thumbs up over here on LinkedIn. I appreciate that. So what I want to say is thank you for joining me on episode number 74. I know the title is 13 Reasons Auditors Are Last to Innovate, but let's face it, this would have been extremely long if we had gone through 13. This is part 1. Part 2 will handle the remaining items. Thank you, Jamal, for the thumbs up. Jamal, Jamal must be behind everybody else. Because, sometimes people can come in and listen from the beginning, because I think we talked about the thumbs up a little later. But thank you for joining me on episode number 74. We will continue with the other 13, with the other, whatever the number is, wherever I stopped off with the next episode. See you next time.
Thank you for watching this episode of Audit Bites. If you receive value from this podcast, do us a favor. First, tell other auditors. Second, give us a 5-star review. And finally, talk to Robert about training your auditors. Our contact information is on our website, www.thatauditguy.com. It's also where you will find our course catalog, on-demand courses, a kick-butt blog, other podcasts, Robert's best-selling books, and last but not least, audit merch. That's right, we have audit hats, shirts, mugs, and more. Thanks for watching and listening. See you next episode.